In this week's parsha, we're told about the various punishments that are given by Beis Din. One of the punishments, the most severe, is skila, stoning. If a man sins so egregiously, not only does he lose his lease on life, he's stoned. But the pasuk tells us that it doesn't end there. After being stoned, his body is hung up for all to see. His body is hung up to shame the man, to show to the world what he's done and the punishment that's meted out to him. However, the Torah says, take his body down quickly. Before Shkia, before sunset that night, his body must be taken down. Granted, he must be hung, but you must take it down quickly because Killas Elokim Toloi. It's an embarrassment to God, the fact that his body is hanging. Rashi explains, how is it an embarrassment to God? Rashi explains quite simply, man was created in the image of Hashem. If man is hung there, it will look like Hashem is hung there. And Rashi says that's literal. In fact, he gives us a mushal. He says, imagine that there were two people, identical twins. One rose to power, became the king. The other turned to a life of crime. Imagine that the criminal got caught and they hung him. People passing would say, oh my goodness, the king is hung. Says Rashi, that's what the Torah is telling us. Man was created in the image of Hashem. It's an embarrassment to Hashem if a human being is left hanging. Take down his body before sunset. This Rashi is quite difficult to understand because two identical twins look identical. One would mistake one for the other. But no human being would look at a man hanging and say, oh my goodness, Hashem is hanging. No man could be mistaken for God. So what does Rashi mean with this mashal? And I believe the answer to this question is based on understanding the role that Hashem gave to man. If you were to look at a rock, you and I would see it as an inert object. It's there. But if you go into the subatomic level, you'd see it's actually full of life, full of movement. Electrons spinning around, constantly in motion. And on that level, all of matter really is energy. It's the energetic bonds that keep everything there in existence. Just as the physical world has a subatomic level to it, so too the physical world has a spiritual dimension keeping it in existence. When Hashem created physicality, He made it based on spirituality. All physical elements have a spiritual underpinning that keep it in existence. When Hashem created man, Hashem gave man the keys to creation. Hashem put man into the role of the maintainer of the spiritual level of the world. If man uses his time, his energy, his life appropriately, he infuses energy into the spiritual level of the world. If he misuses his life, he does the opposite. But physicality itself is based on man because physicality is based on spirituality, and spirituality is based on man's input. Therefore, if one were really astute, one would look at man and say, oh my goodness, creation itself is dependent upon him. In a sense, he's almost a creator, a small creator, but that's his role. What Rashi is telling us is that you and I may not view a human being that way, but if we were really astute, if we really understood man's role, we would say, oh my goodness, he's serving in the role of a maintainer of physicality. It's almost like he's Hashem. One could almost mistake a human being for God because that's the power that Hashem gave to the human being. You and I, again, may not view it that way, but that is the reality. And in an absolute sense, it's an embarrassment to Hashem because someone who's so like Hashem is hanging that it's an embarrassment to Hashem. Again, whether we fully grasp this or not, there is a fundamental concept that this Rashi shares with us. And that is that we have to train ourselves to look at a human being differently than we normally do. Rather than looking at the flesh and blood, looking at the potential, looking at the spiritual element, if I were to view a human being that way, I would stop and say, oh my goodness, that's a man. Do you understand the power given to him? Do you understand who he is? And if I would train my eyes to see man that way, I would deal with every human being in a vastly different manner. This Rashi is teaching us a fundamental concept. Number one, when I look at any human being, to understand that is a man created in the image of Hashem, and therefore he deserves a tremendous amount of respect. And number two, I too am a man. I too was created in the image of Hashem, and therefore there's untold greatness within me, and the potential greatness that I could reach is unimaginable.